Morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I see some people are still joining in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome to our webinar on GitHub Copilot Agent Mode. Um, we're calling it the future of autonomous coding. I've heard a lot of controversy around it, like it's going to replace us and it's going to do this and it's going to do that and it's not going to do this, it's not going to do that. Let's just talk about it. Let's see what it is and go from there. So before we dive into it, my name is Matt Krawiec. I'm a senior software engineer at Concurrency. I'm part of the delivery team. We're working with clients, delivering these products, oftentimes using Copilot to help us in doing so and strengthen the product that we ultimately deliver. So a little bit about me. I'm a huge Formula One fan, and you're going to see some of that today. I got married last year, and it's our first anniversary is coming up here in a week. So that's why there's the highlight there. So shout out to my wife. And as we continue, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be discussing today. So first of all, a quick intro and evolution of Copilot. We're not going to spend a very long time on that. We really want to understand the coding agent, which is codenamed Project Padawan. We're going to get a deep dive into agent mode within Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio. We're going to talk about the differences between that and Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, and we're going to actually look at the coding agent, which is the next step in autonomous coding. We're going to talk a little bit about Azure Site Reliability Engineer. That is an example of the autonomous aspects from a DevOps perspective. I think it's hugely valuable to look at it there. We're going to talk. We're actually going to see the coding agent in action. We're going to see the agent mode in action, and we're just going to talk about where it's good, where it's bad, how we can make it better. I'll talk a little bit to my experience with it, given how I use it and what I've seen it excel. Like oftentimes you see on blog posts, here's what it's good at, and then you actually use it and you find out it's not. I want to talk to you a little bit about where I'm coming from. And then we're going to talk about the impacts on project management. So how we can integrate GitHub with project management tools, or just the fact that we can, and then dive into some questions, some commonly asked questions, and then if the audience here has any, we can definitely dive into those as well. So Copilot, it started in 2021. It came out in 2021 as a pair programmer. It was just autocomplete, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't like it that much. I didn't find it to be really exciting. I thought it was somewhat cumbersome with the chat completions, especially when you had to add the comments. I did like that it was somewhat helpful in predicting on what you want to do next. As the years went on, it got better. But now, today, it's a whole different story. And if you're using it just for the chat completions, you're actually probably using it wrong, or you're using it right, but not to the extent that you should or you could. But in a few years since its launch, Copilot capabilities have grown tremendously. It's in use by over 50,000 organizations. And in the recent build, Satya Nadella actually said, "Hey, it's no longer your pair programmer; it's your peer programmer." These kinds of advancements are a fundamental shift in Copilot being more than just a suggestive helper. It is your autonomous coding assistant. It'll work with you, and we're seeing that more and more apparent. Now, the two things that we're going to be focusing on today is Copilot Chat and the agent modes, which is inside of your IDE or your code editor. It's kind of like that rubber ducky, but it's also starting. So Copilot Chat is your rubber ducky, and then agent mode is your rubber doer. So it's actually going to go out and make changes for you, and you'll see that. We'll actually showcase some of that, and we'll showcase the importance of being very clear when you wanted to do whatever you wanted to do. And then the next thing that we're going to look at is Copilot Coding Agent. It is an agent that works in the background on issues. It submits pull requests. It is that, again, that peer programmer. It goes beyond the code editor. We have an example that we'll get into. Some that my colleague helped. There is a kegerator. So at our office, we have some kegs, and the team a few years ago has decided to implement some IoT and ultimately allow us to use the keg using that IoT. That has been left unmaintained, and we're going to take a look at some of what we can do using Copilot Coding Agent here soon. Now, I think every one of us here has heard of Copilot Chat and Agent Mode for the most part. It is in Visual Studio, it is in Visual Studio Code, and we'll talk about that. But what I do want to talk about is Copilot Coding Agent, and which is this new preview feature, or this new preview product in GitHub. Now, it was nicknamed Project Padawan. Sounds kind of cool. I prefer to call it that. But officially, it's called Copilot Coding Agent. They probably should have stuck with the Star Wars reference. It is capable of that full functionality. It writes the code, it writes the tests, it writes the documentation, it creates the PR and responds to your PR feedback. You can talk to it like a human being almost in a PR, except you don't have to wait for 20 minutes for somebody to get back to you. The big advantage here is that you can have your repository, create issues, and ultimately assign your agent to it. You're going to start seeing that. We'll showcase that here in a second. Now, if we go ahead and head over to GitHub, can everybody see this okay? Is it actually, no, well, let's make this just a tad bigger for everybody. So I have here a very quick issue in GitHub that we created. It's part of that repository that I told you about. And what I found is that the README was pretty bare. It actually was like 2 sentences. And as somebody that's going into this project, I didn't find that very helpful, but I would like a starting point. So I created an issue here that said the README is completely empty, doesn't tell me anything about the project or how it started locally. And I basically asked it to do just some very basic things, give me a project overview, what the app does, blah, blah, blah. I also am interested in some outstanding issues and areas for improvement. Now, in order to do this, I would have needed a developer that, was familiar with the code base and was able to do this. Well, now what I can do is use Copilot, my AI pair programmer, and assign Copilot this task. And once it is assigned this task, it actually says that, hey, I assigned the task to Copilot. Once Copilot acknowledges that, it will put the little eye emojis here and ultimately tell me, hey, I'm working on this. It takes a little bit, so we're gonna get away from this for just a second and let this work. And then one thing that we're going to look at is Brian Hayden, one of our solution architects, went ahead and told Copilot, hey, we're using original face API service. It's no longer supported. Let's refactor this to Azure AI Foundry Vision Service. And this was a while ago, and I hope Brian doesn't mind me showcasing this a little bit ahead of time. I'm assuming he's going to want to see it for a different webinar. But ultimately, Copilot went ahead and created a PR. This is all generated by it. It says this PR refactors the face service from a deprecated Azure Face API and starts to basically what it did is it ultimately is still allowing us the use of the old API while giving us the Azure AI Foundry, which is the now recommended implementation or solution rather. And it went ahead and I've never been this detailed in a PR description, unfortunately, but it went ahead and made the code changes all about 17 hours ago. It took it about, I think, 10 or 15 minutes to get through all this work. And first, it created an initial plan for the issue. Then it had an analysis. for the refactoring, and then ultimately it refactored the face service to support Azure AI Foundry Vision Service, which we're going to take a look at now. And some of the changes that it made are pretty significant. It just added some new endpoints and add face using Azure AI Foundry, and then now it's using Azure AI Foundry and making HTTP calls to our endpoint to create the face for the kegerator. And then the next thing that it did is it completed the face service, refactored tests, and it added documentation for what it did. And it did all of that in about 20 minutes. I think even less so. Now, that's just one issue, and it's just one issue that Brian and just created. The fact is if you have 5 issues, you can take those 5 issues and assign each one of them to Copilot and work them in parallel and allow Copilot to do this work. Now, we assigned Copilot to start doing some of this stuff. It linked a pull request. So let's take a look at this pull request. If we look here at the right, development is in progress. So it started 2 minutes ago. It was thankful that we assigned this issue, and it said, "Hey, the Copilot assigned Copilot and myself as a PR reviewer, and it started work on behalf of me 2 minutes ago." So let's let it do its thing. We're going to jump back into our presentation here for just a second, and then we'll come back to this. So ultimately, the vision behind these agents is that we have different agents for different things. And some of that is already available. So in public preview today, in Visual Studio Code specifically, where you can create custom agents. So you can have, I think one of the, or modalities. So one of the things that you've seen, I'm sure, is there is ask functionality, chat, and then agent functionality modes. You can create your own mode with specific instructions to get it to do certain things. So for example, you can have a refactoring mode, or you can have a new implementation mode, and ultimately use that. And I'll show you exactly what that looks like in Visual Studio Code here later. But then the fundamentally, the goal is to use these agents that understand the code base. At some point, they're going to fully plan the implementation, and to some degree, they already are, right? You saw the implementation of that face service. It planned that out, and it knew what it was going to do, and then it went ahead and did all the work. Now, one other one that is super powerful is the Azure SRE agent, the site reliability agent, and we've talked about this a little bit. This is something I'm super actually excited about from Build. We saw some of this coming out at Build. This is in public preview. You can sign up. There's a wait list. There's an SRE agent application that you can sign up for. Effectively, it helps us to respond to incidents quickly. And what it does is you're able to ask it questions within your Azure space. So questions like what changed in my app, or visualize requests and 500 errors. You can ask it these questions within the context of your Azure subscription, and it'll ultimately yield those answers. Now, one of the other things that it does is it monitors those issues and is able to plan around it in real time. So an example of that is here. We saw that our SRE agent detected a new Azure Monitor alert. It saw that something is wrong, and ultimately it started investigating. On the right, it started investigating and forming a hypothesis. It started determining and reviewing logs and just analyzing a bunch of different things that could be the root cause of the problem. Now, ultimately, what it came up with is a root cause analysis, and said, hey, I think it's this, or I think it might be that. And then based on that, I'm going to go ahead and create a work item in GitHub, create a GitHub issue that a developer can reference and look at and work with. Now, it's doing this, and it's doing this. Now, these are just screenshots, obviously, but it's doing all of this in minutes sometimes. And you're able to respond to these incidents super fast rather than having to wake up in 3 in the morning and see these alerts and ultimately not really know what's going to happen. It will not only detect the issue, it'll remediate the issue. If it's tied to a deployment, it'll actually undo the deployment to get back to the previous working version, and then create an issue, as you're seeing here, to say, hey, this deployment failed. Let's go ahead and fix that, and then we can come back to it. Pretty cool, right? So we're going to take a break from the slides again. Let's check on. Okay, so I was going to say let's check on our agent, but it finished. So remember, we ask it to just do some documentation. This is a simple use case, frankly. This is not nearly as complex as what Brian asked it to do earlier, but this is a fundamental first step for me being able to go in there and start doing stuff in the absence of a different developer. Now, basically, it went ahead and let's take a look at the files. So if we look at the commits, it updated the README, and I'm not gonna put this in let's look at it in this case. Now, some of the things that it added is a description of the core features. So some of the features of this application is tag line monitoring. You're able to manage the users, manage the faces, who can use this and who can't. It is integrated with Azure. It is old, right? Keep in mind, bear with me here. This is I think the last commit was 5 or 6 years ago. It's pretty. It's getting there. So it's on using ASP.Core 3.1. It's using AutoFac, which is interesting. We are using Serilog, so that's impressive. Now, and it tells me, based on what I asked it to, how do I actually set this up? How do I run it locally? It told me all that, which is great. Now, it did give me some outstanding issues. It told me of some missing documentation, some lapses in error handling. Now there are some areas for improvement. Enhance the DevOps pipeline, add security. The one thing that I saw this before all as well is give me the fact is tell me frankly that the fact that you're still on 3.1, that's a security risk, and just start upgrading. And it's interesting because you could probably use the agent itself to upgrade. We're not going to do that now. Didn't necessarily have that part ready, but in just a few minutes of time, it documented this for me. It told me exactly how to run it. It told me what the core features of this are, and it submitted all that in a very good PR that I can just go ahead and approve, right? And it's doing all of that on behalf of me. So this underlines one of the key features, the key important facets of this is not leaving you behind. You still need to be there. It's doing things on behalf of you, and it's just a way for us to be more effective and more productive. Now, the next thing that we're going to move on to is a little bit of the agent mode. So what we're going to do is create a new Azure function, and we're going to call it the Formula One API, just because I like Formula One. And I went ahead and I prepped a bit of a prompt. So we're going to use .NET 8 for now with an HTTP trigger, function level authorization assign. Now, what I did is I prepped a little bit of a prompt, and I'll show you why this is important, because one of the most important things that here, let's get this up here on this screen. Beautiful. I hope everybody can see this. If this is too small, feel free to just spam me in chat and I will adjust as needed. Now, this is just a baseline Azure function that we're looking at here. And one of the things that I've done is I've prepped a very quick prompt. Now, this is Visual Studio 2022, and about a month ago, they released in full the agent mode for Visual Studio. It was a thing in Visual Studio Code for months, where an agent mode existed in public preview since the beginning of the year. Now, I was really upset for the first half of the year that it wasn't a thing in Visual Studio. And on the first day of build, it came out, and I was super excited, and I couldn't wait to get back to start using it. And this is it. This is it. This is here now. And so what you're looking at here is on the right side, we have Copilot chat. But if you look, we can actually enable on the top right, we can enable Copilot edits. And when we do that, we can start to go ahead and give it some prompts. Now, like I said, I have given it, I have a prompt already prepared. I didn't want to spend too much time writing it with the audience here on board, but it's not nearly as, it's not a fancy prompt. But we'll go through it. Using the latest C# and .NET coding standards, create an Azure function to maintain Formula One teams. We'll maintain the following entities: a team, team principal, and drivers. A team can only have one team principal and 2 drivers, and we're gonna want to just maintain these. It's just gonna be a very quick CRUD API. We're gonna want to CRUD teams, CRUD team principals, and then CRUD drivers. And then because this is a demo, I'm gonna be very specific, and I'll tell you here why in a second. For the first iteration, use EF core in memory to maintain the data. And this is important because I did this once in a demo and I didn't tell it this, and it went really fancy, and it expected a whole database to be ready and stood up. And well, actually, I didn't even give it this much of a prompt. I just said create an Azure function to maintain Formula One teams. And interestingly enough, what it did is it did all of the stuff using EF core. It took a little bit of some liberties with regard to the entities themselves, but here we're going to narrow it down. And then for the first iteration, we want to use EF core memory, and then we're going to use ASP.NET core integration, and yeah, so we're using the 4.1 model, and this is important because you have various models here at your disposal. Again, true for Visual Studio and true for Visual Studio Code. The model you choose is largely up to you, and it may very well depend on your use case. It's difficult to know. There's not one model that's good for everything. I've seen some posts like, hey, use Claude for refactoring and then use Gemini for new fun. Yes, there is cases for one being better over the other, but really it really depends on what you're using it for. So we're going to stick it with 4.1 for now, and we're in agent mode. So I'm going to go ahead and send it this prompt. Now, again, it's a brand new clear solution that you saw. So what's telling us right now is it's going to add EF core in memory and ASP.NET core integration. It's going to create entity classes for the team principal, and driver, modeling their relationships, because I told it that a team can only have one team principal and 2 drivers. It's going to create a DB context. It's going to implement the appropriate Azure functions. Now, the caveat here is depending on your architecture, you probably don't want all this functionality in one Azure function. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to keep it in one for now. And then it's going to register DB context and configure DI, and it's going to go from there. Now, let's take a look at file by file what the results are. So here it creates the team in, well, actually, let's start with the project structure. It went ahead and created a models folder, a functions folder for driver, team, and team principal functions, and data, where we have our DB context. And so if we look at these files, we have our team file. So it created the team model. I'm going to accept that with tab. I like team principal, so we're going to hit tab again for that. I like the driver. We're going to hit tab for that. It went ahead and created the DB context. So it created the DB set for all of the team principals. Now I'm getting errors because I'm missing Microsoft Entity Framework core. So I'm not going to use Copilot to add that. We're going to keep it simple. There we go. We're going to, and then here it created all of the team endpoint functions. we have a function for gating teams, gating a team, creating a team, updating a team, and deleting a team. So standard CRUD, and so nothing special there. But I think the messaging there isn't that this is doing it and doing it in this way. The fact that it's setting all this up for us with the click of a few buttons and a few messages, and we're done. Now, the next thing that it did is it created an endpoint for team principal functions and driver functions. And it's using, again, EF core to do all that. And it's set up ultimately my startup. And I can fix all this later. It's not really what I'm interested in. And it left function one alone, or left that boilerplate alone, so we can just go ahead and delete it. Now, what is the value proposition? It is not that I can go ahead and vibe code my way through an endpoint, through an API for managing Formula One teams. It is the time to creating a POC. It is the time that, first of all, I mean, this is CRUD functionality for an API, so there's value there, and it did all that in seconds, for the most. Well, actually, now that's pretty cool. We're gonna move on from this. Let's talk a little bit about GitHub. Now, the difficulty I had starting out is really just getting grips on where this stuff is. And what I found is that GitHub doesn't really do a great job in communicating, at least to me, what the new stuff is and what it's doing. So, and the example I have of that is actually is part of our organization, is the fact that if you look at our Copilot here, one second, let me get into here. An organization's Copilot policies. Actually, models didn't exist as an individual page a few months ago. And then when it didn't auto enable all of these models for you. And if you don't, you won't get them in Copilot, and you won't get them in agent mode. So here you see a full list of all of the models that you have available for you in agent mode that you can enable. And ultimately, I'm saying this more as a PSA for you to know that you need to look in here to enable this stuff. Because if you don't, you're missing out on half the features that are available to you. Now, in Copilot policies in GitHub, there is an important Copilot metrics API. If you're trying to monitor and see metrics and who's using it, who's not using it, this is a useful API. But really enabling Copilot coding agent comes from here. So you need to go in here, whether you're an organization or whether you are an enterprise, and come here. Now, there are some, in order to be able to enable Copilot agent, you need to have either an enterprise with coding agent enabled, which is, I believe there's a cost of $30 per seat. Or you can have an individual Pro Plus license, and that's important because without that, this entire work that it did is not available to you. You need that. Fundamentally, I think that all I just wanted to get across is look in here more often than not, and look at specifically billing and Copilot settings, because a lot of this stuff is not publicly like, hey, we have this now. You just find it one day. The one interesting thing I found is these custom instructions. So previously, one of the preview features of Visual Studio Code Insiders is or Visual Studio Copilot Agent is you could stick instructions into your repository. And you could have instructions that are repository specific. And recently they added this view, which is adding custom instructions organization-wide for your agents. So for example, if organizationally everything you're implementing is in Python or .NET, whatever, you can add these custom instructions and tell it that, and it'll ultimately know that, hey, this is what I'm supposed to use, and these are the kinds of dependencies to use and not to use. You could do that organization-wide here, or at a repository level within your repository. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is Visual Studio Code Insider or Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio. And one of my biggest gripes is the fact that this experience is different. Now, like I mentioned before, Visual Studio Code had Copilot Agent Mode for quite a few months before Visual Studio, but then even from a user interface perspective, these are the modes that I was telling you about. What's in public preview now is the ability to create your own mode. Like I said, a refactor mode where you specify hard instructions and say do this, don't do that. And you can actually again publish that to your organization. And then but then the experience between that and Visual Studio is different. And it's even more different with SSMS because SSMS has Copilot, but you need to actually specify an OpenAI deployment and yada, yada, yada. It's not nearly as integrated as this. My hope is in due time, we're going to see that become unified and just all in all be more uniform across the platform. So let's jump back into the presentation here for just a second. I wanted to talk to you about efficiency gains and their use cases. The fact is uh, one of the strengths of Copilot is the fact that it follows predictable patterns. So for example, if you're setting up a new React component or writing an API client like we just did, right? It is using the predictable patterns and the standards of Azure Functions, and it's using the if core, and it's very good in that. And the strength is in my opinion is the first draft. It's the first draft of some functionality. It's the quick POC and getting it out there. Now, where I've used it in production, which is different than POCing, is generating unit tests. And I can actually tell you that it is good for that. There's caveats though. And the caveat is that you should probably consult closely with your QA team for those unit tests. And the reason why is it can sometimes be wrong. It'll generate unit tests that are not necessarily testing all the edge cases, and at some points it'll actually make you think you're right. You will think that you tested this, but ultimately you haven't. And I think it's strong to come together and discuss all those cases and incorporate that into the prompts. Documentation, I think you've seen a great example of that today. Refactoring and improving code. Again, I think that the example with the Face API and then using Azure AI Foundry is great. It is refactoring and improving that code. And then one of the things that they market it as is translating code between languages. And I've seen that actually happen, but not between languages, but between frameworks, where a different framework was used with, I believe this was Airbnb used a different framework for testing all of the entire front end. And they estimated that rewriting all the unit tests for their front end would take roughly about 3 years. And Copilot or in general AI was able to reduce that to I believe it took them 3 months, which is a huge value proposition if you think about it. So all of these use cases are real, and I think that they're applicable. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is GitHub and how it jives with project management integration. Now, not all of us are using GitHub and for work, and I have a feeling most of us actually don't. I have a feeling most of us are using ADO. And if you are using GitHub, great, you have a leg up. Now, the fact is you do not need to lose all of your work. You do not need to lose all of your project planning, all of your project management, all of your work items. You do not lose any of that by migrating and using GitHub. You do gain the Copilot Agent Mode and or coding agent to be able to help you with these tasks if you do use it in GitHub. But the most important thing is you can integrate GitHub with ADO. You can integrate GitHub with Jira, and ultimately sync GitHub pull requests with things like Azure Board work items. You can track the development, and then you can actually automate the transitions using GitHub Actions and ADO APIs. All of that is rather easy to set up from within ADO and GitHub respectively. And this is going to help us to transition to use GitHub more for the development aspects of things and use potentially ADO or Jira for the project management side of things and keep those two separate and but at the same time working seamlessly and integrated. Now, this is important because I know I have plenty of clients who are like, oh my God, we have everything in ADO. And what you're telling me is we're moving to GitHub. And do I think the focus is on GitHub? Absolutely. Do I think that the GitHub project management is going to get better? Absolutely not. So when I was actually at Build this year, I spoke to the GitHub team, and they very, very flatly told me that the GitHub projects area, which does give you some aspect of project management, is more for smaller teams, and it's more for like just everyday users rather than enterprises and organizations trying to manage projects. That's what ADO and Jira is for, and that's why these integrations exist, so that you can still do that on that front while keeping the work in GitHub and making use of these features that they're going to keep on adding. All of these agents, the coding agent, and more. Now, with that, there are some common questions that I often get. First of all, how do we access this? I talked a little bit about that. Fundamentally, you have plenty of that in GitHub. Copilot chat is enabled and in public. It's now publicly available. So is Agent Mode in both Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio. You do need to have a license, right? So either you're an organization or an enterprise or just a team, but you're paying for the Copilot seats, and that's enabled. There is Copilot free. There are certain limitations and throttles on it. So if you really want to open the floodgates, having the pro version on an individual licensing perspective, or having a seat within a team, organization, or enterprise is the way to go. From a privacy and security perspective, that is something that is extremely important, and it's always asked. GitHub Copilot does not upload your entire code base to any public server nor share it. It is always within your repositories within your organization. So anything that's private stays private. The AI models themselves were initially trained on the World Wide Web, on public open source code. Now, businesses take that to another level, and Copilot for Business has enterprise level privacy. So it ensures that your prompts or your completions are not reused to train the models thereafter. And the big thing is that in this case, Copilot for Business is also covered under the privacy SLA that GitHub has. And so it guarantees that it will not retain or leak any code. And obviously it is designed for developer privacy in mind. And so, and I say that because Microsoft and GitHub has these contracts and agreements to that effect for enterprise users. They would lose the trust on day one or day zero of this happening, hour zero, if some of this was leaked or some of this went out. So can you use it safely and privately? Microsoft and GitHub tells you yes. Will AI like Copilot replace developers? I don't think so. Now, I heard something interesting that somebody said that within 10 years, you won't write any lines of code. I was scared when I heard that at first. Um, Brian Hayden said that to me, and not necessarily scared, but it's like, whoa, like, are you serious? Like, do you really think that? I don't think we'll be replaced. I think that the jobs that we'll do will change. Um, I I think that some of these tasks will be uh, more architectural for us, more design driven rather than implementation driven. So I don't necessarily think that will be fully replaced. Now, what if Copilot suggestion is wrong or suboptimal? Can it produce bugs? Absolutely. And I think from personal experience, it does so not even necessarily during bad prompting. It just does it. It creates bugs. It helps me solve bugs every day, but it also will lead you astray if you let it. And so I think it all goes down to the whole question up above, which is, will it replace us? And I think because of the fact that it creates some of these bugs, then no, I actually don't think that that's the case. And then the most important one, I think, is how do we get the most out of it? How do you use it effectively? I think that there is plenty of ways to use Copilot. I use Copilot in Teams to help me debug. I use Copilot Agent to help me write code. I use Copilot Edits to to make some changes. But I actually do find myself more often than not using the chat functionality for production code. I don't like agent mode for production code. I think it does a little too much that personally I prefer to use it in chat and get more specific with how I want to do things. I use it every day to help me debug and help me. It is really that rubber ducky for me. So how do I get the most out of it? I use it by having it by being that conversation, by allowing me to not necessarily have to engage with another developer. It is that peer programmer that I can talk to solidify an implementation and then come to the table with the rest of the team. So I think that that's important. And then the key takeaways really, um, it's not been long. It's been 4 calendar years, but really it's been more like 3.5 years. And it went from just this Copilot AI that can perform some code completions to now implementing entire APIs for us, which you saw, taking care of issues in GitHub and which again you saw, and it's going to get better and better and better. Now looking ahead, there is agent mode and Project Padawan, which obviously coding agent, but I prefer Project Padawan. They are the future of autonomous coding. Uh, but at the end of the day, it's also important to remember that Copilot is a Copilot. It's in the cockpit with us. It's along for the ride. We've got our hands on well, I said cockpit, so we're flying the plane. And so the idea is to empower developers, not necessarily remove them. Now, the world of software development changing completely at a swift pace. And so embracing these tools uh, will give you not the edge. It gave you the edge maybe 3 years ago. Now it's going to be the utmost necessity, where without it, you are actually going to fall behind. So use Copilot, use AI, use it as your assistant. And if you don't, you'll probably get left behind. So I really encourage you to embrace it. Now, with that said, how can we help? First of all, there is a survey that our team posted in the chat. If you wanna take that survey, we'll get in touch. But we have a few things that we can help from an organizational perspective. We have GitHub Copilot usage metrics and visioning session. So if you're trying to get the best of an understand or a better understanding of how your developers are using this, or they're not using it, or what language they're using it for, and then ultimately be able to track that more and report on it, we have a session for that where we could talk through that. I think the more important one almost is Copilot Agent Use Case Discovery Session. So this session is centralized around your business and determining, hey, where can you use Copilot Agent? Where is it helpful for? Is it going to help you in this refactoring? Is it going to be helpful in writing these tests? And how do we make that happen in the best way possible? And then there's, of course, our executive AI envisioning session, and it's positioning, it's above my pay grade, but it's positioning at an executive level. How can we best position a business to embracing the AI? Now, shameless plug, some of our team members have some other upcoming webinars. Real results with Microsoft Copilot, what's new and what works. This is Microsoft Copilot, not Copilot, not GitHub Copilot. So this is more of the low code implementations, and then pro code meets low code, navigating the full stack seamlessly. That's going to be really interesting because I've used Copilot Agent and I code every day, but then based on the engagements I've been on, I've also needed to move on to the more low code area and using Copilot Studio and Azure AI Foundry and all that. And so I think that both of those are great. I'm actually personally going to attend the last one because it's gonna really bridge the gap and help us imagine as developers how can we embrace low code, because I know that 1 year ago me would have been scoffing if you told me that I got to use a GUI for stuff. So that's that. I do want to thank you for attending. I do want to thank you for your time. If you have any questions or if you want to talk about anything, I'm happy to hang back.
Mac, I see you did have a question in here.
Oh, here, 1 second. Let me stop sharing because I don't even know the question. I apologize, Rob. Along the lines of replacing developers, perhaps not fully replacing experienced developers, have you seen instances where existing development teams have experienced resources are utilizing less experienced developers and having to spend significant time reviewing code of less experienced developers, be able to delegate those tasks to Copilot themselves? Yes. So I think that, and we're even seeing that in the job market. I think that a perfect example is the fact that this coding agent and even agent mode, it's doing stuff that you would typically ask an entry-level developer to do. So yes, 100%. It is impacting the entry-level developers. I think that from a market perspective, it's going to change because an entry-level developer is not going to be just an entry-level developer in the sense that we understand it today. It may very well be it'll be more thought provocative. Entry level is going to become closer to design. Now, that's going to be an issue for me because some of that design comes from experience, and how do you get that experience without first, putting your keys on your fingers on the keyboard and coding stuff away and being wrong. I do think that for sure less experienced developers are impacted, and so yeah, they're fundamentally it's going to happen. How can we register for the next webinar? Great question. I think Amy's
I'm putting
got
that in the chat right now. I have the exact link, just putting it in there right now. There you go.
Rob,
it looks like got another question there about Bitbucket.
Yeah, I'm looking. So first of all, Rob, if I answered your question in like a very political way, just hit me up. Like I'm happy to talk about it. Fundamentally, I think that less experienced developers are impacted. I think that again, these PRs are evidence of that. We're able to do more with less. And I only showed you the doing one task or the other task that Brian did all at once. We haven't really talked about the fact that, again, you can create 5 of these issues and assign Copilot to all 5 of these issues at the exact same time. And so how that's going to impact velocity and how that's going to impact the fact that, hey, maybe I don't need 2 developers to do these 5 tasks in 3 hours each. Maybe I can use Copilot to do it. and then use a senior developer to review. Because the other thing is you can have a conversation with coding agent inside of the PR. So you saw the PR. I can actually, and I wish I showed you this, I apologize. You can actually say, hey, you should please change it to this, or this isn't right, or why would you do this? And in the PR, the agent is actually going to make the change and actually going to do whatever it needs. So I think it really impacts how we're going to work. Nitesh, can we use Copilot Agent with Bitbucket? I don't know. I don't believe so, but I can find out for sure. I believe that this is only is not in Bitbucket, but I can totally find out and get back to you. So if you just leave me your email in that survey, and Amy and I will be sure to get back to you. Are there any other questions? I see that Rob is feverishly typing away. Maybe some others want to join in on the fun. Yes, and that's ultimately what we want to do, and that's ultimately what we want to use AI for. So, any other questions before we call it a day? Cool.
Looks like we're all good. Yeah, if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to put them in the survey, like you said, or Mac or somebody from our team can get in touch with you if you put a note in there. And thank you everybody for coming. Thanks, Mac. It was a great session. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending. Have a great day and take care.